And we are told that on 1st of January 2016, Mavuno Limited was in the process of raising fund to undertake 4 investment projects. And this project require a total of 30 million. Given below are the latest rating to the 4 investment projects. So we have project A to D. We have the required initial investment, then we have the internal rate of return. Additional information, number 1. The company had 9 million available from retained earnings as at 1st of January 2016. And any extra equity finance would have to be sourced through an issue of new ordinary shares. And the market price per share, per ordinary share on 1st of January 2016 was 25.6 ex-dividend. So that's our PO. Information on earnings per share and dividend per share over the last 6 years is as follows. So you are given the information about the past dividends. Now, can you indicate for 2010 DO, 2011 D1, 2012 D2, like that? Yeah, whenever you're given information about the past dividend, that means you need to compute the growth rate using the compounding method, dn over do n minus 1. So how much is our dn? Our dn, we have 3.5 divided by do, and our do was 2.5. N is, yeah, it's 5 minus 1. So give me the growth rate. So that's equivalent to 7%, right? Yeah, so that's the growth rate of a dividend. Number 3, we are told that issue of new ordinary share would attract a flotation cost of 4.6. So we need to get the cost of retained earnings since we want to determine the amount of new amount raised. We're determining the amount of new amount raised. That means we are computing WMCC. And for WMCC, to compute the cost of retained earnings and the cost of ordinary share, which is DO 1 plus G, PO plus G, DO 1 plus G, PO, you raise the flotation cost, you add G. Now, how much is our DO? Yeah, now our DO, now let's be here. DN, when computing the growth rate, is the last dividend. DO was the first dividend to be paid. But in this case, DO1 plus G is D1, the expected dividend. If you want to determine the expected dividend, our DO in this case is the most recent dividend. And the most recent dividend was for 2015, which was 3.5. 1 plus growth rate, 0.07. PO, in note number 2, I told is 25.6. Then you add the growth rate, 0.07. Here you take 3.5, 1 plus 0.07. 25.6. Note number 3, I told that the issue of new ordinary share would attract a flotation cost of 4.6. Then you add 0.07. So the answer should be in percentage. Sorry? 21.63. What about the second one? Sorry? 24.8%. Number 4, 9% irredeemable debenture, par value is 1,000, could be sold with a net proceed of 95 due to a discount of 2% and a flotation cost of 30. So that's irredeemable debenture. So how do we get the cost of the debt? In case of irredeemable debt, you will take the interest over the value of the debt, 1 minus T. And here we have 2 debts. And we are told that 9% irredeemable debenture. So the interest based on the par value is 9% of the par value, which is 1,000, divided by, you are told that 9% irredeemable debenture, par value 1,000, could be sold with a net proceed of 95%. Due to a discount of 2% and a flotation cost of 30 per debenture. That equivalent to 3%. So the value of the debt, the power is 1,000, but you only get a net profit of 95 due to a discount of 2%. I mean, flotation cost of 2% and a flotation of 3%. Then you multiply 1 minus t. So you take 90 divided by 950. And then you multiply by 0.7. We have 6.63%. Then you are told that the maximum amount available from the issue of 9% redeemable debenture would be 4 million, after which debt could only be obtained at 12% interest with a net proceed of 90. 12% of the par value, which is 1,000, with a net proceed of 90% of the par value. The par value is 1,000, you multiply by 90, then 1 minus t. So 120 divided by 900. You get? We have 9.3. Number 5, 10% preference share can be issued at par. So the cost of preference, 10%. So therefore, if we issue it at par, the cost will still be meant to be 10. So how do you get the cost of preference? Is the interest over the value of the preference times 100. I told that to be issued at par of 80. So interest is 10% of the par value, which is 80. The value of the preference will be issued at par. So still divided by 80 times 100, and you still get, yeah, when you issue a debt at its par value, the cost of capital does not change. Number 6, the company optimal capital structure, which is considered optimal, is as follows. So equity is 45%, preference share capital is 30%, debenture capital is 25%. The corporate tax rate is 30%. The company has to exhaust internally generated funds before raising extra fund from the external sources. Required, number A. Number A, the level of total new financing at which breaks occur in the weighted marginal cost of capital curve. So we determine the breakpoint. And to get the breakpoint, you see that the amount traced from a given source divided by the proportion or the weight. And you see that for the breakpoint, you only compute for what you are given the specific amount. For example, under the equity, we have the retained earnings. Can we go back to note number 1? The company had 9 million available from the retained earnings as at 1st of January 2016. So the retained earnings is 9 divided by the weight. Retained earnings is part of the equity. Note number 6, the equity capital is 45%, 0.45. You get? I get 20 million. So what does it mean? Retained earnings is part of the equity. And for the equity, you have the cost of retained earnings, cost of ordinary share. The maximum we can get from the retained earnings is 20 million. So that means anything between 20, I mean 20 and below, we can afford through the issue of retained earnings, of which is cheaper at 21.3%. Now, any amount to be raised under the equity above 20 million, you have to issue new shares, which is expensive. And the cost of ordinary share is 24.8%. Also, we have the debt. And for the debt, we have two. We have the 9% debt and 12% debt. Which one are you given the specific amount? Number 4. 9% redeemable debenture, par value 1,000, could be sold with a net proceed of 95% due to a discount of 2% and a flotation cost of 30. The maximum amount available from the issue of 9% irredeemable debenture would be 4 million. So it's 4. And note number 6, the proportion of the debenture capital is 25, 0.258. That is 16. Yeah, what does it mean? This means that, you see, this is from the 9%, which cost is 6.69. So that means under the debt, anything below 16 will issue 9%, of which the net cost is how much? The cost of that is 6.63. When our debt exceeds 16 million, anything above 16 million, you go to the next expensive, which is 12% with a net cost of capital of how much? 9.3%. Number B of the question. The weighted marginal cost of capital for each of the three ranges level of total financing as determined in A above. So we determine the WMCC. How do we get the WMCC? Is the weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of preference, cost of preference, weight of the debt, cost of the debt, 1 minus 10. And how many MCC do we compute? It will depend now with the ranges. I mean with the breakpoint. For the breakpoint, we have the minimum, which is 16. So between 0 to 16, then above 16 to 20, and then above 20. Weight of equity, equity represent 45%. Then you multiply by the cost of equity. So the breakpoint for retained earnings we have is 20. So that means between 0 to 20, we use the cost of retained earnings, and the cost of retained earnings is 21.63, 21.63. Anything above 20, now we issue new shares, which is expensive at 24.8. Then you add the weight of preference. Preference is 30%, so it's 0.3. Then you multiply by the cost of preference. Cost of preference just 1 at 10%. Then you add the weight of the debt. The debenture is 25%. For the debt, we have two costs, and we have the breakpoint. The breakpoint for the debt we have is 16. So that means between 0 to 16, we use the cheaper one, which is at 6.63. When it exceeds 16, anything above 16, now for the two, we use 9.3. And they say that here you don't tax because our costs are already net of tax. So give me that. Mm-hmm. 16.49%. Sorry? 0.65. 15.06. Good. Number C. Number C. Advise Mavuno Limited on the projects to undertake, assuming that the project are divisible. So C number 1, which project to accept? You see that you only undertake a project only when the internal rate of return is greater than WMCC. That's the only time you accept. And also you see that when ranking the project, you rank them in their order of the priority of their IRR. Now let's go to the projects. Can you rank them in the priority of their IRR? So rank them, just write in your question paper. So you rank, you get the project, you determine the cost of the project, you accumulate the cost, IRR, compare against WMCC, then you comment. Rank 1, 2, 3, 4. Project A. You have D, C, and A requires a cost of 8 million, D is 6, C is 9, and B have is, now we accumulate. So it's 8, 14, 23, 30. And the IRR, so we had 26, we have 22, 20, and now we get the WMCC. You see that to get the WMCC, use the accumulated cost. So here we have 8. So 8 is between 0 and 16. So therefore the WMCC will be 14.65. 14 is still in between. So 14.65%. 23 is already above 20. So therefore WMCC will be 16.49. Also that is above 20 will be 16.49. 26, 14 accept, reject. You accept. 22, 14. You accept. 2016. You accept. 16, this one you reject. So you should only accept project A, D, and C. Then number 2 of the question, you are told that determine the optimal capital budget. So how do you determine the optimal capital budget? You have accepted the first 3 project and the accumulated cost is 23, or you take 8 plus 6 plus 9, you get 23. Good. So you can take a screenshot. September 2021, question 4B. Dinosoft Limited capital structure, which is considered optimal, is given as follows. So you have the debenture capital, we have reserves, we have ordinary share capital, we have the preference share capital. Now that's the optimal capital structure. So what are the weights? If you're given the optimal capital structure, that means we need to compute WMCC. I remember giving the difference between WACC and WMCC. So that WACC, it uses the market values or the market average. But for WMCC, we use the optimal capital structure. That means optimal capital structure does not change. So we need to determine the equity. We also have the preference shares, and then we need to have the debt. For example, for the debt, we have the debenture capital, which is 25. How much is the total capital? It's 100. So therefore, it will be 25 over 100. That means present 25. We also have preference share capital, which is, so it's 15 over 100, you get 15%. And lastly, we have the equity. How much is the equity? Okay, if you take 45 plus 15 plus 25, does it give you 100? So ordinary share capital, you have it 45. And also you have reserves. Reserves is part of the equity. An amount of 15, you get 60, you divide by 100, so it will be 60%. Additional information. The firm historical earnings per share and the dividend per share over the last 5 years are given as follows. So that means we get the growth rate, DN, DO, N root minus 1. So let's go ahead, you have the dividend per share. For 2016, can you indicate as DO? Then D1, D2, D3, D4. So let's get DN. How much is our DN? 3.6. Our DO we have is 3, N is 4. Then you minus 1. So give me the growth rate. so it's approximately 5%. And then you're told that the company ordinary shares currently sells at 50 per share at the security exchange. New ordinary share will be sold at this price. So that means we need to compute the cost of retained earnings and the cost of ordinary share. DO 1 plus G, PO plus G, DO 1 plus G, PO minus FURG. How much is our DO? Good. It will be 3.6, 1 plus the growth rate, 5%, 0.05. Then PO, I told that the market price is 50 plus 0.05. This one will be 3.6, 1 plus 0.05, 50 minus flotation cost, and then we'll add the growth rate. Let's go to note number 3. The company expected net income in the year ending 31st of December 2020 is 40 million. So that's the expected net income. Dinasoft Limited adopts a constant payout ratio of 40% as its dividend policy. So how much is the retained earnings? 60%. Good. So you'll take 40. If we pay 40%, that means we'll maintain how much? 60. You get an amount of 24. Good. Number 4, the company can raise additional capital as follows to finance the acceptable investment project. Equity capital, utilize all the available retained earnings for the year ended that 1st December 2020. Any extra equity, external equity, will be raised through an issue of new ordinary share at a flotation cost of 10% of the issue price. So 50 minus the flotation cost. 10% of it, is it 5? Yes, or just take 50, you multiply by 90%. So give me that. The first one is 12.56. About 10.4%. Then we have preference share capital. So we determine the cost of preference. The cost of preference is the interest over the value of the preference minus flotation in case there is any. Then you multiply by 100%. So that new preference share will be issued at 11% coupon rate. The par value of each share is 100. So the interest will be 11% of the par value, which is 100, divided by 100 minus, you are told that a new preference share will be issued at par, subject to a flotation cost of 5. Then you multiply by 100. 11 over 95. 11.57%. 58. 11.58. And then lastly, we have debenture. New debenture can be sold at coupon rate of 13. See that if you use them at coupon rate, that means the cost of the debt. If you issue any debt at coupon rate, will mean to be 13%. The debenture will be issued at par. But in case you are given the par value, are you given the par value? You're not given the par value. If you could have been given the par value, to get the cost of the debt redeemable, you take the interest over the value of the debt, 1 minus. But if they are selling at par, that means it will not change. So it will mean to be 13%. So just take 13, 1 minus T. 13 times 0.7. 9.1%. Number 5, the corporate tax is 30%. Required, number 1. Calculate the breakpoint in the marginal cost of capital. So you say that to get the breakpoint, you take the amount traced from a given source of capital, and then you divide by the weights. And we say that when determining how many breakpoints to compute, it will depend on the specific amount given. You're not given for the debt, you're not given for the preference. For the equity, you are given the retained earnings. So the only breakpoint you can compute is for retained earnings. And retained earnings is 24. And the weight, retained earnings part of the equity, so it's 0.6. You get? 40 million. So that means The breakpoint for retained earnings is 40. So between 0 to 40 is the cost of retained earnings. This is cheaper at 12.56. Once you exist that, now you go to the next expensive source of capital, which is ordinary share at 13.4%. Number 2, the weighted marginal cost of capital in each of the intervals between the breakpoints. So that's WMCC. And WMCC is the weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of preference, cost of preference, weight of the debt, cost of the debt, 1 minus T. So between 0, we only have one breakpoint to 40, and then above 40. Weight of equity is 60%. Between 0 to 40, use the cost of retained earnings, 12.56. This one will be 13 point. Weight of preference shares. Preference share you have is 15, 0.15, 0.15, and the cost of preference. The cost of preference is 11.58. Then we have the weight of the debt. The debt represents 25, 0.25, 0.25 times the cost of the debt. The cost of the debt we have is 9.1. We have 12.05. Have 11.55. Number 3. Dinosoft Limited has a foreign potential investment opportunity. So you have those projects, the initial outlay, internal rate of return. Required. Using the investment opportunity schedule, advise on which project to accept and hence determine the firm optimal capital budget. We see that you only accept the project if the internal rate of return is greater than WMCC. And then we see that you rank the project on the priority of their IRR. So we have the project. I think they are well arranged. We have V, W, X, Y, Z. Determine the cost. You accumulate the cost. IRR, compare against WMCC, and then you make a conclusion. X is 10. Here we have 20. We have 10, 20, and 10. Now we accumulate is 10. We have 30, 40, 60, and 70. IRR, we had 16, we had 14, 11, 10, and 8. WMCC used the accumulated cost. So 10 is between 0 to 40, so it would be 11.55. 30 is still between 0 to 40, 11.55%. What about 40? Good. 11 point. Then above 40, now that's when you use 12.05. Accept, reject? So you have only accepted the 2 projects. So you undertake project V and W. Therefore, the optimal capital budget is 10 plus 20, you get? Yeah, 30 million. So you can take a screenshot. May 2019 question 4. Question 4, part B. Zian Limited, an unlevered farm. Can you attain unlevered? Zian Limited, an unlevered farm, has initial 10 million ordinary shares that are currently selling at the security exchange for 20. So the farm is unlevered. And how do we get the value of ungeared farm? It's EBIT 1 minus T over the cost of equity of ungeared farm. Or, since the company is all equity financed, you just take the number of shares, you multiply by the market price per share, and you are told that they have 10 million ordinary shares, each selling at the security exchange at 20. So that means the value of ungeared is how much? 200 million. Additional information. The farm most recent earnings per share is 4 shillings and adopt 100% dividend payout ratio. So that means the dividend per share is 100% of the earning, which is 4. So that means they don't retain any earnings. It's better that the farm future dividend for each year will remain constant in perpetuity. The farm is considering to issue 12% new debenture. So if they issue a debt, that means it will change the status from being ungeared to geared. The farm is considering to issue 12% new debenture to raise 50 million in order to finance an expansion program. This will effectively change the status of the farm from unlevered to a levered farm. The farm pays corporation tax at the rate of 30% required. Using proposition, determine number 1 is the cost of equity before and after the issue of long-term debt, the cost of equity. So now let's start before. That means on its ungeared state. We determine the cost of equity. So I said that the value of ungeared farm is EBIT 1 minus T over cost of equity of ungeared. Now this is what we need. The cost of equity of ungeared farm, you'll take EBIT 1 minus T divided by the value of ungeared farm. Now, if you take EBIT, earning before interest and tax, then you raise tax. You see, this farm is ungeared, so therefore there is no interest. So it will be earning before tax. Then you raise the tax. What do you get? Profit after? Profit after tax. So in this case, we are not given EBIT, but you are given the earnings per share. How much is the earnings per share? It's 4 per share. How many shares do we have? If you multiply by 10, actually, how do you get the earnings per share? Let's start from there. Is it not the total earnings? Which is the profit after? You divide by the number of shares. Now, this is what we want. You see, if you take EBIT 1 minus T, you get the profit after tax, of which in this case, you are given the earnings per share. The earnings per share was 1, I mean, it was 4, and he had 10 shares. That means we had made a total earning of how much? Yes, so that's our total earnings after tax. Then we divide by the value of ungeared farm. which is 200. You multiply by 100. 40 divided by 200 is 20 per. Geared states. Yeah, because we have to compute the cost of equity before and after the issue of wrong term. Now, we are using MM. According to MM, the value of levered farm is equals to the value of ungeared plus present value interest tax shield. How much is the value of ungeared farm? Is 200. How do you get the present value interest tax shield? You take the tax rate, which is 30%. They are proposing to use a debt of how much? 50. So much is the value of geared farm? 215, right? The value of the farm, it's made up of the value of equity plus the value of the debt. The value of geared farm we have is 215. The value of equity keeps on changing because the market price keeps on changing, but the debt does not change. So you're proposing to use a debt of how much? 50. So how much will be the value of the equity? Is 215 minus 50, you get 160? 165. But what are we computing? The cost of equity. According to MM, the cost of equity of levered farm is the cost of equity of ungeared, cost of equity of ungeared, cost of the debt, 1 minus 2. The cost of equity of ungeared farm we have is 20% plus the cost of equity of ungeared, which is 20. Then the cost of the debt, note number 3. Set 12. Debt over equity. We lose a debt of 50 and the value of the equity is 165. 1 minus 2 is 0.7. So how much is the cost of equity of the levered farm? Get 21.7%. Number 2 of the question. The weighted average cost of capital before and after WACC. Before, that's the ungeared state. The cost of equity of ungeared farm is the same as WACC. Therefore, how much is the WACC? Before 20%. Then, after the issue of the debt, WACC is the weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of the debt, cost of the debt, 1 minus 10. Weight of equity, the value of the equity of the levered farm, it's 165. You divide by the value of the farm, which is 215. You multiply by the cost of equity of the levered farm, and the cost of equity of the levered farm is 21.7. Then you add the weight of the debt. Debt is 50 over the value of the farm, which is 215. Then you multiply by the cost of the debt. Note number 3. At 12% debenture, 1 minus 3 will be 0.7. So how much is that? You get 18 point? Yeah, 18.6%. Number 3. The current market value of the farm before and after the issue of the debt. The value of ungeared farm, the value of the levered. The value of ungeared is 200 million. The value of the levered will be? We had already computed that. The value of the levered and unlevered farm. Number 4. Advise the management of Ziani Limited on whether to change its capital structure. What do we say about the capital structure? We say that the optimal capital structure is where? The WACC is minimum, and the value of the company is what? Maximum. So we have the ungeared state. Then we have the geared state. So you make your decision based on the 2 criteria. One is WACC and the value of the farm. And geared state, WACC is 20%. Geared state is 18.6. The value of the farm for ungeared is 200 million. The value of the levered is 200. So the optimal capital structure is where WACC is minimum. Why is it minimum? 18.6. Value of the firm is where the optimal capital structure is the value of the firm is maximum, of which we have. So therefore they should change. Now the question was, advise the management of Zian Limited on whether to change the capital. Yeah, they should change by incorporating the debt. So they should change the capital structure by incorporating the debt. So you can take a screenshot. November 2016, question 3. Part A of the question, explain the reassumption of the traditional theory of capital structure. So let's write. I'm sure you don't remember. The capital structure is relevant. The capital structure is relevant since it affects the value of the firm. Since it affects the value of the firm. Number two. The cost of the debt is always lower than the cost of equity. Cost of the debt is always lower than the cost of equity. Number three, increased use of the debt in the capital structure, increased use of the debt in the capital structure does not affect the cost of the debt. It does not affect the cost of the debt up to a given limit, Number B of the question. Majur Limited is just about to commence operation as an international trading company. The firm will have a book value of asset of the 20 million, and it expects to earn 16% return on this asset before interest and taxes. So the expected earning before interest and tax will be 16% of the net asset 320. How much is that? 51.2. However, because of current tax arrangement with foreign government, the company will not pay any tax. Second paragraph. It is known that the capitalization rate of all equity firm in this business is 12%. So the cost of equity of ungeared firm is 12%. The company can borrow debt finance at the rate of 7% per annum. If you have to use the debt, the cost of the debt will be 7%. The management is in the process of deciding how to raise the required 10 million debt finance. The value of the debt will be 10 million. Assume that the Mondragon and Miller assumption apply, required. Using the MM model without taxes. So number one is MM with no taxes. Determine the value of the unlevered farm. The value of ungeared farm, it's EBIT 1 minus T over cost of equity of ungeared farm. But in this case, there is no tax. So EBIT is 51.2. There is no tax, or you can just take 1 minus 0 meant to be 1. Divided by the cost of equity of ungeared farm, which is 12%, 0.12. So how much is the value of ungeared farm? Sorry? 0.7. Number 2. The current value of the levered farm, if it uses 10 million of 7% debt. So the value of the levered farm will still be 420. Yes, because when there is, okay, this is what I mean. The value does not change because to get the value of the levered farm is the value of ungeared plus present value interest tax benefit. The value of ungeared farm we have is 426.7 plus. How do you get the present value interest tax shield? You take the tax rate, which is 0 per of the debt of 10. You'll get how much? Yeah. With no tax, with no taxes, the value of ungeared and the geared will always be the same. Number 3, weighted average cost of capital of the levered farm at the debt level of 7%, 10 million, WACC. WACC of the levered farm is the weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of the debt, cost of the debt, 1 minus T. The value of the farm is made up of the value of equity plus the value of the debt. The value of the levered farm we have is 426.7. Equity keeps on changing, but the debt does not change. So using a debt of how much? 10. Therefore, how much will be the value of the equity? It should be an amount of 416. Good. Then, cost of equity of the levered farm is the cost of equity of ungeared, cost of equity of ungeared minus the cost of the debt, debt of equity 1 minus T, but in this case, there is no taxes. How much is the cost of equity of ungeared? 12 minus the cost of the debt. How much is the cost of the debt? 7. The debt is 10 million, and the value of the equity we have is 416.7. How much is that? To get 12.12. So therefore, you can be able to get WACC. Weight of equity, you take the value of the equity, which is 416.7 over the value of the farm, which is 426.7. You get the weight of the equity. You multiply by the cost of equity. The cost of equity of levered farm is 12.12. Weight of the debt, you'll take 10 over the value of the farm, which is 426.7. You multiply by the cost of the debt. The cost of the debt was 1 minus T, but in this case, there is no what? No taxes. Good. What do you get? You got 12 point? Yeah, so it's 12%. Part C of the question. Assuming that the company in B above now pays taxes at 30%, at the rate of 30%, compute the following in the Modigliani and Mira world. Number one, the value of the firm if it uses no debt. That's the value of ungeared. So it's EBIT 1 minus T, cost of equity of ungeared firm. EBIT is 51.2, 1 minus 2 is 0.7. The cost of equity of ungeared is 12%. So how much is that? Sorry? 290? 298.7. Number two, the current value of the firm, if it uses a debt of 7%, 10 million. So the value of the rebate firm is the value of ungeared present value interest tax. The value of ungeared you have is 298.7. Then you take the tax rate, that's the value of the debt, which is 10. So it will get 301.7. Number three, the weighted average cost of capital at 7% debt level of 10 million, WCC of the rebate firm. So it's the weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of the debt, cost of the debt, 1 minus T. The value of the firm is made up of the value of equity plus the value of the debt. The value of the rebate firm is 301.7. Value of equity, they're using a debt of 10 million. Therefore, the value of the equity will be 291. Cost of equity of rebate firm under MM world is the cost of equity of ungeared, cost of equity of ungeared minus the cost of the debt of equity, 1 minus T. Cost of equity of ungeared firm was 12% plus 12. Cost of the debt is 7. The debt is 10. Value of equity is 291.7 times 0. So how much will be the cost of equity of the rebate firm? You have 12.12. So therefore, you can compute our WACC. Weight of equity, the value of the equity we have is 291.7 divided by the value of the firm, which is 301.7. You multiply by the cost of equity, and the cost of equity is 12.12. Weight of the debt, 10 over 301.7. The cost of the debt is 7%. 1 minus is 0.7. So how much is that? $11.8. Get your 20 marks. So you can take a screenshot. May 2018, question 4B. Lagdara Limited, an unlevered farm operating in the textile industry. The farm current capital structure is summarized as follows. We have the ordinary share capital, we have the share premium, we have the retained earnings and the shareholders fund. So the farm is all equity financed. The farm is considering borrowing 10% debt finance of 40 million. So if they use the debt, the cost of the debt will be 10%, and the value of the debt, they will borrow 40 million. In order to finance the expansion program. Additional information. Annual earning before interest and tax generated by the firm are 60 million. This is expected to remain constant each year in perpetuity. EBIT 60. The firm ordinary share currently trading at the market price per share of 200 at the security exchange. The firm is ungeared. So if the firm is ungeared, to get the value of ungeared firm, you can just take the current number of shares, you multiply by the market price per. Let's go to the capital structure. You will take 120 million, you divide by the par value of 50 to get the number of shares. Then you are told that the current share are trading at 200. Yeah, don't add the share premium and the retained earnings. Why? You see, this 50 is only the par value, and this is the market price. That means there is par value of 50 plus all those premiums. So you only take that. So 120 times that is how much? Sorry? Yeah, so the value of ungeared firm is 480. Number 3, the corporate tax rate applicable is 30%. Required. Using approach and the information provided above, analyze the financial implication of the change in the capital structure. That's what we call the capital restructuring. So using the information provided, you evaluate. So how do you evaluate? So you see that whenever you're making a decision about the capital structure, there are two things you consider. What and what? The illustration I drawn for you here. What are you considering? Yes, that's correct. So the value, using the value of the rebate firm is the value of ungeared, present value interest tax shield benefit. How much is the value of ungeared firm? Plus present value interest tax, you take 30% of the debt and you are proposing to use a debt of? That's 12. Is it 492? Good. Then you also compute WACC. Cost of equity of ungeared firm is the same as WACC. So we want to determine for ungeared state. Value of ungeared firm is equals to EBIT 1 minus T over the cost of equity of a levered firm. So how do we get the cost of equity of levered firm? To get the cost of equity, you cross multiply. So it's EBIT 1 minus T over the value of ungeared firm. EBIT we have is 60. 1 minus T is 0. And the value of ungeared firm we have 400. 42 divided by 480, you get? Sorry? 18 point? 18. 8. 8.75. So that means the WACC of ungeared firm is 8.75. 5%. Now let's look at the geared state. If now they use the debt, we know very that the value of the firm is made up of the value of equity plus the value of the geared firm is how much? The value of equity plus the value of the debt. They are proposing to use a debt of, so therefore, how much will be the value of the equity? That 452. Cost of equity of River Farm is the cost of equity of ungeared, cost of equity of ungeared, cost of the debt over equity, 1 minus T. The cost of equity of ungeared firm is how much? 8.7. 8.75. You minus the cost of the debt. The cost of that is how much? 10. Debt over equity. Debt is 40. The value of equity is 450. 1 minus T is 0.7. Give me that. Sorry? This one. Sorry? Which one? Oh, this one, eh? Like that, eh? Yeah. Like that, eh? This one is 8.67%. So therefore, I can compute WACC. The WACC is weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of the debt, cost of the debt, 1 minus T. The value of the equity you have is 452. You divide by the total value of the firm, which is 492. Then you multiply by the cost of equity of the referred firm, which is 8.67 plus the weight of the debt. The value of the debt is 40 over the value of the firm, which is 490. Then you multiply by the cost of the debt, which is 10, but now you multiply by what? 1 minus T. Yeah. So how much would be the WACC? $8.53. Yeah, 8.53. So now let's come up with a summary here. WACC of the ungeared state, we have it's 8.75. For the geared state, we have is 8.53. The value of the firm, here you have is 480, but the value of the river is 490. Yeah, so the optimal capital structure is where WACC is minimum. That's 18.53, and where the value of the company is maximum. Now, number two, I told that, number two of the question, justifying your answer, advise the management of Ragdara on whether to change the capital. Should they change? Yes. You see, currently the company is ungeared. They are proposing to use a debt, so therefore they should change the capital structure by incorporating what? Yeah, by incorporating it. So you can take a screenshot. Let's try another one. September 2021. Question 2B. September 2021, question 2B. Mamba Limited existing debt to equity ratio is 0.5 and the asset beta is 0.4. So what do you mean by asset beta? Now, asset beta is equivalent to the beta of an geared firm. And you are told that Mamba Limited existing debt to equity ratio is 0.5. So what is that? Is it the debt of the equity? 0.5 is there? So how much is the equity? 0. That's very wrong. Eh? The debt to equity ratio is 0.5. That means the equity is? It is 0.5, right? Now open with me this question. November 2018. November 2018. Question 5C. November 2018. Question 5C. Sorry, November 2018, not 16. November 2018. And note that we have said that the asset beta is equivalent to the beta of an geared firm. So in that question, November 2018, question 5C, we are told that Embakasi Investment Limited, blah, blah, you're given that. Then you have the debt to equity ratio. The first one is 0. So debt to equity ratio. Now, does that represent the proportion of the debt of the equity? That's the debt, right? So for example, the first one is 0, 0, 0. How much will be the equity? 1. 0.25, that means the equity is 0.75. 0.6, the other one will be 1.7, the other one will be. Don't be serious. Continue with that trend. Now, are you getting my point now? There is a difference between debt to equity ratio and the question we had done for 2011. We are given the proportion of the debt. If you are told that the proportion of the debt is 20%, that means the equity is 80%. This is debt to equity ratio. What does it mean? 0.5 is to 1. Are you together? So if you want to get the value of equity, it's 0.5 plus 1, you get 1 point. So that means the debt, or the, if you are to compute now WACC, it's weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of the debt, cost of the debt. If you use 0.5, 0.5, you are very wrong. The debt is 0.5, therefore it takes 0.5 over 1 point, and then equity is 1.5. So kindly note the difference between debt to equity ratio and the proportion of the debt. They are totally different. If they were the same, you could have given the answer for 1.7. So that means if the debt to equity ratio, debt to equity ratio, and now let's go back to our question. September 2021, question 2B. At least now you know. Mamba Limited existing debt to equity ratio is 0.5 and its asset beta is 0.4. The company decided to undergo a financial reconstruction during which it would repurchase its outstanding share using the borrowed debt. So that means we expect the proportion of the debt to increase. This will change the debt to equity ratio to 0.9. So the current is 0.5. If they do the reconstruction or they do the change of the capital structure, debt to equity ratio will come to 0.9. Additional information. The risk-free rate is 6%. Return on the market portfolio 14. The firm adopts 60% payout ratio and expect to generate earnings per share of 6 in the current financial year. So D1, what's D1? That's the expected dividend, right? Number 3, I told that. The firm adopts 60% payout ratio and expect to generate earnings per share of, so it's 6 and the dividend payout ratio is, so the expected dividend will be 3.6. The firm generates a net income of 12 million and the equity capital is 96. The corporate tax rate applicable is 30%. Required. The firm levered equity beta before and after the financial reconstruction. Yeah. Compute the levered equity. So we use the method called Hamada model. Do you know Hamada model? Yes, you know. I gave you the formula on how to compute the beta of the levered firm. So before reconstruction and then after reconstruction. And using Hamada model, the beta for levered firm, you say that the beta of equity of ungeared firm, 1 plus debt to equity ratio, 1 minus T. Do you know that formula? That's what we call Hamada model. How much is the beta of ungeared firm? It's here. We say that the beta at the asset beta is the same as the beta of the ungeared what? How much is it? 0. Good. So it's 0.4. 1 plus, how much is the debt to equity ratio currently? 0.5 times 1 minus 3, which is 0.7. After reconstruction, it'll take 0.4, 1 plus. Now, what's changing is the debt to equity rate? It will increase to 0.9. 1 minus 3 is 0.7. So, what do you get? Apply board mass. You take 0.5 times 0.7, then you add 1. You multiply by 0.4. 0.54. 0. Yeah. The more debt you use, the more increase the systematic risk. Remember, the beta is the measure of what? The measure of risk. Yeah. The more debt you use, the more risk it is. What happens to the value of the share? The more debt you use, what do you expect to the market price per share? Will it increase or will it go down? Yeah. The more debt you use, the market price goes down. They're inversely related. Good. Less debt, the market price will increase. Good. Number 2. So you have answered number 1. The firm cost of equity before and after the financial reconstruction using CAPM. Cost of equity. Now using CAPM, we say that RS is the same as what? Cost of equity, which is risk-free, expected return of the market minus risk-free multiplied by the. So we compute before reconstruction and after. How much is the risk-free rate? So it's 6 plus. Expected return of the market is beta before 0.54. This one is 0. So how much will be the cost of equity? 10.32. 11 point. Good. Lastly, number 3. Analyze the impact of the financial reconstruction on the firm share price. So what will be the implication of the firm share price? So share price is PO, right? How do you compute PO? PO is equals to DO 1 plus G. Yeah, R minus. Yeah, we see that. How do we get the cost of equity? It's DO1 plus G. Then you take PO plus. Now in this case, we want PO. Yeah. When you're doing the corporate valuation, I showed you how to get the value of the share. So it's DO1 plus G R minus G, where DO1 plus G is equivalent to what? D1 R minus R is the cost of capital, G is the growth rate. Do you have the growth rate? It's not there. So we compute the growth rate. How do you get the growth rate? I gave you two formula. There is compounding method, DN over DO, but in this case, you're not given information about the past dividend, right? Use the other method, RBE, where R is the retention ratio, and you are given in note number 3. The firm adopts 60% payout ratio. So how much do you retain? 40%. What is BE? The return on equity, right? How much is the return on equity? How do you get the return on equity? The return on equity is the profit after tax. You divide by the equity. Then you multiply by what? That's how you get the return on equity. Or you take the earnings per share of a market price per share. Can we go to note number 5? Number 4. The firm generated net income of 12 million and the equity capital was? If the equity capital was 96 and you generated 12, so how much was the return on that equity? Yeah, the return on equity is 12.5%. So therefore, to get the growth rate is the retention ratio, B is the return on equity, which is 12.5. Therefore, how much is our growth rate? 5%. 5%. So now you have to determine the financial implication to the changes in share price. I mean the market price. So before reconstruction, after reconstruction, I've said that to get PO is D1 R minus G. D1 is 3.6 R. R is the cost of equity, right? Now, before the reconstruction, the cost of equity you have is 10.32. So it will be 0.1032 minus the growth rate, which is 5%, 0.05. So how much is that? Sorry? 0.67. After the reconstruction, the formula is the same. D1, it's 3.6. R, after the reconstruction, the cost of equity was 11.2. So it will be 0.112. The growth rate does not change, is 0.05. So how much will be the market price per share? 0.0? Yeah, what has happened? We are told to evaluate the implication of the market price. It has reduced. Yeah, we see that the more debt used in the capital structure, there is an inverse correlation. The more debt, the lower the market value of the share or the market value of the equity. So the share price has reduced. Can take a screenshot. May 2021, question 4C. Makazi Limited current earnings per share is 6. The firm has initial 50 million ordinary shares, which have a par value of 20. The firm total revenue and the capital revenue amount to 500. Let me show you how to crack that information. So we are told that Makazi current earnings per share is 6. The firm has initial 50 million ordinary. So how much is the total equity? I mean the total earnings. It's 6 per share. How many shares we have? You get an amount of? The firm has initial 50 million ordinary share, which has a par value of 20. The value of equity, we have 50 million share with a par value of plus the firm total revenue and capital reserve is 500. Now let's be here. The value of the equity is the number of shares times the current market price per share. Are you together? But in this case, we are multiplied by the power. So anything above the power value will be taken to reserve. That's the share premium reserves, and that's why we are given this 500 and the general. So how much is the total value of the equity? Is that 1,500? Good. So give me the return on equity. The return on equity is that it's total earnings. You divide by the value of the equity. 300, that's the total earnings, and the value of the equity is 15 times 100. You get? 20%. The company has an asset beta of 0.9 and retention ratio is. So DO, let's go back to the first paragraph. Makazi Limited current earnings is 6. The company has an asset beta of 0.9 and retention ratio of, so the dividend payout ratio is 40. So how much is that? Is that 2.4? I'd note that the other question we are given the expected earnings. So that's why we worked with B1. Now in this case, we are given the current earnings, which is 2 point. Therefore, that is DO. Then you're told that the management of Makazi intends to undertake a financial reconstruction, which will result into a debt to equity ratio change from 0.5 to 2. 0.45, it will change to 0.2. You know, we are doing the same question the one we have done. It seems like in this case, it's like we are doing a new question. It's not a new question, it's the same. The question, it's all about how you interpret the question. And by the way, in your exam, 3 questions, we have already done them in class. But high chances, most of you watasema the exam ilikuwa moto, but they not realize that we have done the same question in class. So then you are told that additional information. The risk-free rate of return is 8%. The expected return on the market portfolio is 18%. Corporate tax rate is 30%. The firm return on equity before and after reconstruction will remain. Yeah, the return on equity. Now you start asking which return on equity is the one we have computed, which is 20%. Required, evaluate the impact of the financial reconstruction on the firm's share price. The first step, you are given the asset beta. That's the beta of an geared firm. How much is it? The asset beta is the beta of an geared firm. 0 point? We use a Mada model. And a Mada model, the beta of the derivative firm is the beta of an geared firm 1 plus debt over 1 minus C, because now they want to change the debt to equity ratio. So that means the firm is geared to from 0.4 to 0 point. If the debt to equity ratio reduces, what will happen to the market price per share? It will increase. So before, after. The beta of equity of ungeared is 0.9. 1, debt to equity ratio was 0.45 reduced to 0.2. 1 minus T is 0.7. Give me that. $1.18. 1.03. Then the next step, use CAPM to determine the cost of equity. RS is the same as the cost of equity, risk-free, expected return of the market, risk-free, you multiply by the beta. Before reconstruction, after reconstruction, how much is the risk-free rate? We have it's 8 plus expected return of the market, we have is 18, risk-free is 8. Beta before the reconstruction is 1.18. After the reconstruction is 1.03. $19.8. 18.3. Then the next step, you determine now the market price per share. PO is DO 1 plus G, and then R minus G. Before, after. Number one, we need to determine the growth rate. Growth rate is RBE. How much is the retention ratio? 60%. BE is the return on equity. How much is the return on equity? 20% of 60, say 12%. Good. So DO, how much is our DO? 1 plus the growth rate, which is 12%. R is the cost of capital. Here is the cost of capital. The cost of capital before was 19.8, so 0.198 minus the growth rate 0.12. After it will be 2.4, 1 plus G, then R. After the reconstruction, the cost of capital will be 18.3, so it's 0.183 minus the growth rate 0.12. And the first one is? Sorry? That 4.46%. You expect this one to increase. How much is it? 42. You get your 8 months. So Yogi, what has happened? Yeah, you have to evaluate the impact of the reconstruction to the share price. So the share price has? Yeah. You can take a screenshot. Now, can you check for April 2021? No, April 2022, question 1B. April 2022, question 1B. Donisoft Limited is a juice processing firm which is solely equity financed. The company board of directors are considering diversifying their operation by entering into soda processing industry. Additional information. The current unlevered equity beta is 1.4. So the beta of ungeared farm currently is 1.4 for Dansoft Limited, that's our company, and 1.5 for the soda processing industry, respectively. That's why they want to venture in. Are you together? That's why they want to venture in. So that means after they venture in, now that will be after the reconstruction. Are you together? So therefore, the beta of ungeared farm now of the new investment will be 1.5. The gearing in the soda processing industry is on average of 40%. That's gearing. So how much is the equity? How much is the equity? 60. Yeah, this is not debt to equity ratio. This is the proportion. Hence, the capital structure comprises 40% debt and 60 equity. The market return, the return on the market portfolio is 15, risk-free rate 12, debt finance is considered to be risk-free. So how much is the cost of the debt? 12%. Are you together? The Armada model should be used to determine the levered equity. Yeah, that's what called Armada model. The beta of the levered farm, you take the beta of ungeared farm, 1 plus debt over equity, 1 minus. Yeah. And you see now we have, okay. The cost of equity will be determined using CAPM. Corporate tax rate is 30. Required. Recommend the suitable discounting rate for the new investment. What do you mean by discounting rate? I told you that we are doing the same question. That's WACC. Are we together? When you are doing WACC and WMC, you see that the difference is that WACC will be used as a discounting rate when evaluating the existing project. MCC is used as a discounting rate when evaluating the new project. So the discounting rate is the cost of capital, and the cost of capital is the average. You get the WACC because they have the debt, they have the equity. They recommend the suitable discounting rate for the new investment if the director were to finance the new project as follows. Now we are evaluating the new project. What if the debt will be 20% and equity will be 80? So that, first of all, you write the formula of WACC. Weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of the debt, cost of the. Do you have the weights? Which is what you are given. So you are told that number 1, if 20 is the debt, the other one is 0.8, 0. Do you have the cost of the debt? You have the cost of the debt, which is 12. So you multiply by 12, 0. So what you need to get is the cost of it. And how do you get the cost of equity? Use CAPM. RS is risk-free, expected return of the market minus risk-free. You multiply by the. How much is the risk-free rate? Expected return of the market. Risk-free is. Then you compute the return. Now the question is, now in this case, we're evaluating the new project. Right together? We're evaluating the new project. We use Armada model to determine the beta, not of Dansoft, but the beta for the soda processing. Right together? Because the question was, recommend the suitable discounting rate for the new investment. So therefore, the beta of ungeared, we are using the one for the soda processing. So it will be 1.5, 1 plus debt to equity ratio. How much is the debt to equity ratio? To go number 1. Debt is 20%, right? Equity itakuwa ngapi? You're given the proportion. What will happen if we invest 20 in debt and equity invest 80? So the debt to equity ratio is 0.2, 0.8, multiplied by 0. Got that. That's you're getting your 8 marks. I also told, when we were doing blocks last time, I told them that 3 questions also come from my handout. And question number 1A was from my handout. Part B is what we had already done in the question. Also, we had already done question number 3 and number 5. Actually, almost all the 5 questions. It's only that once they change some figures, you are done. And I'm sure all your exam actually 100%, not 90 something, 100% is what we have done in class. Hakuna kitu takuja mpya. You go and remember assumption. Nakumbuka assumption ya limitation. Usipokumbuka, what will happen? Mzoei sauti yangu so now that marks the end of our not syllabus. Nimaliza syllabus kitambo. That marks the end of what? John Mark making noise here, right? Are you just staring at me?